Lord, I want to be your vessel. Give me the means to save someone today.
Hi Jonas! Really big day today, no?
Kind of. I tend to be a little tense in these missions.
Really? Do you know that you can use social media to be a missionary? Do you know Adventist teams?
Adventist teams? What is that?
Well, wait a second. I'm gonna send you an invite to be in my team.
Okay. What should I do now?
Well, you download the app, register, and you're ready to start using it. It's really simple. Adventist Teams is a digital missionary community where you can find the best content to share with your friends.
Oh, nice. Look, my friend needs some hope. Where can I find something about that in the app?
Right here on tags.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Defining Your Health. This morning, we want to talk about autism awareness and advocacy. And with me, I have Ms. Christy Castillo Almeida, and she is the founder and executive chair of Autism Belize. Ms. Christy,
Hi
how are
there.
you this morning? Go ahead.
I am good. At least it's not sunny and too hot today because I've been just having enough of the heat. So I'm enjoying the weather now.
Lovely. It's good to have you in studio with us. And so I want to share with our viewers that this is an interesting topic. I know it's something that we're not used to. I personally am no expert on autism, so this should be another good episode. So I want you to share this link with your family and friends. It's a good opportunity for awareness, right? So, Miss Christy, tell me about Autism Belize.
Okay, Autism Belize is a parent organization, and we focus on teaching about autism, promoting awareness, showing acceptance, and providing support. So those are our 4 goals. We started in April 2020, just in time for COVID. But it's been a really busy year, but we're basically just a bunch of parents that are trying to do our best to promote the awareness, educate Belize. We firmly believe that an educated Belize will be a stronger, kinder, more accepting Belize. And so we really focus on education.
Yeah, that's a interesting gap to fill for you to be able to recognize that. What inspired you and some other parents to start to take this initiative?
Honestly, we're all special needs moms. You said you didn't know much about autism. Most people don't until autism comes up into your life and slaps you in the face. I didn't know much about autism until my son was diagnosed with autism. And then you realize that there's so much to learn. And For me, it was when I came home. I was living away from Belize for about 18 years. And I came home the end of the summer of 2019. And my sister was the one, she's like, I want you to meet this family and they have a child. And I started listening to families, just like we'd sit there and have coffee and talk. And so many parents said, you know, I've not been able to have a conversation like this with anybody before. Nobody understood, or, you know, I could see where there were some gaps and things. And I recognized really how the lack of services not just affects the children, but the families as well. And so I thought I could do something. I could just try and do something. And initially it wasn't like I was going to go, oh, I'm going to start an NGO. No. I just wanted to help some parents. And I figured my son is now 14 and he's lived in 5 countries.
Wow.
So, and he's gotten therapy in all of them. So I figured, you know, I'd reach out to his old therapists who all, you know, they spend so many hours with their son, they love him. And I'd say, hi, can you help? I've got, you know, families that want to know more about this or that. And it just sort of took off from there.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. 14 years, that's a long time. You are an expert in your own field.
It's funny because some people go, I've had meetings with like NARCI and whatever, and they go, okay, so your degree is in, I'm like, yeah, communications. It's not in special ed. And I'm very clear about that when we do trainings. The trainings are done by professionals certified. But I have spent the last, he got diagnosed at 1.5 years. So the last 13 or so years, learning. And every time there's a training, I learn something else. It's such a vast topic, and there's so much that's still unknown that they're still trying to figure out. So a lot with autism and working with our kids is sort of trial and error. Right. And so it really, for me as a parent with my son, and we hit every sort of challenge as you go away. So when he is younger and we're dealing with like potty training and this, and I'm learning how to do this and that, then he's getting a little older and it's like, wait, how are we going to do in school? And what are IEPs and how does this work? And so every time, every new stage, it was more for me to learn. And I figured, you know, I can help parents also learn because they don't have that real support here in the country. They didn't before.
And you're taking all that experience and sharing with us. So, you having learned, you're going to teach me today, and we need to start with the basics.
Yes.
Can you share with us generally what is autism?
Autism is a spectrum disorder. It is a developmental disorder. So, not a disease, and it's not necessarily an intellectual disorder, necessarily. By spectrum, what it means is that there's a wide range of categories. Earlier, you know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, they used to say, you know, Asperger's, autism, then like severely autistic. You had like 3 main categories there. Then they started saying high functioning and low functioning and traditional autism. Now they talk about it as level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 being the high functioning or the Asperger's, level 2 being the average autism, then level 3 more severe. And when you're looking at autism, you're going to look at 2 main areas, behaviors, repetitive behaviors that will interfere in their lives. And then you're looking at social and social communication and language communication. So you're looking at all of those and trying to see what deficits there are and what problems there might be. So when you're looking for a diagnosis, a child might be verbal, but still have problems with conversation and social skills. Okay. And then they might have all of these repetitive behaviors or, so, you know, a child who's always stimming like this because that means they can't sit and write because they're so active. Okay. Or a child who will line up their cars in a row or just spin the wheel instead of playing that. They tend to think very literally. So playing imaginative play won't get to them. You know, a teenager on the spectrum, you might say something like it's raining cats and dogs, and they'll look around and say, no, that's water and that's H2O, and they can tell you the scientific thing, but they don't get that sort of communication. And so you've got to look at it, all of that. And it's funny because before we used to think about the spectrum as like the different, like I'd say the blue, and you'd have like light blue to dark blue, and you can go up and down the spectrum. Now they're talking about it as sort of like a circle with like the different colors. So if you have a lot of sensory issues, you might be really dark in this area. But if you have little communication issues, you're smaller here. But then you've got So it varies. And that's why one of the most popular quotes with autism is, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. Because while they have problems in certain areas, depending on the degree, it makes each child unique and different.
I'm glad that you said that, because as parents, I think it's hard to identify some of these things, because children do all sorts of things growing up, and you don't want to initially just go to the point where my child is autistic when maybe they just have some type of OCD. Like, there's so many different things that it could be. Like,
and that is absolutely correct. And that's a big problem, because some of us, we tend to judge others. You know, we're like, well, how can this mother not accept this? And what's the pick name? Yeah. And you don't know. And first of all, you're a first time mom. I knew something had changed with my son, but I had no clue. And I'm a first time mom. There were no other kids. Sometimes if you've had one or two kids, by the time you have the third, you realize, wait, something isn't right. But for us, you're not really sure. And you don't, unless you're taking your child for regular wellness checks, which, just be honest, we don't necessarily do that in Belize. You don't know that, you know, nobody's on, or you're obsessive like me. I had the what to expect when you're expecting, and then the toddler years, and I go, okay, 6 months, he's supposed to be doing this. And I was checking it out. If you're not that kind of mom, you might miss some of these things. And so to your brain, your child might be a picky eater. Your child might be, you know, probably rude or spoiled because he keeps throwing himself on the ground and crying. Or, you know, he might be a little antisocial because there's no other kids around. Or, yeah, man, you know, they talk, but he's a boy and boys talk late. Or, you know, they talk because we got a lot of languages in our house. And so there's all these different things for you to sort of push it off. And it's really hard. And so for me, talking to parents or aunts that'll contact me, or cousins, because I get it all, the first thing I got to say is we have to look at all the behaviors, and let's see, you know, let's look at it realistically, see where they are. If a child at 2 should be doing this, this, and this, what is your child doing? And what are your problems? And then I always say, you don't have to go to the dreaded A word, because the A word is scary. Autism is scary. It still scares me. So what we can look at is if there's just developmental delays. So if your child is 3 and still not speaking fluently, only has 1 or 2 words, that does not necessarily mean he's autistic. It could. It's one of the signs that you check off. But it could also be that there's just a language delay. That might mean you've got to work with them on the language. And there are things you can do for that. So there's some parents that come to me and I go, I can't honestly tell you, and I'm not an expert either way, whether your child is autistic or not. But I do know that by 3, he should be saying, you know, two words together or 3 words together, whatever it is. And your son isn't doing that. So what do? We get help, or we learn to help them. And that's it. If your son is struggling in math, you get a tutor. You don't wait till your report card comes home and it has a big F. If you knew he was struggling throughout the year, you will sit down and help him with math, or get somebody to help him with math to make sure he's doing good. And that's what we have to do with our kids. If we see these deficits or these struggles, we get help for them.
And it's consistent, I would imagine, because I know I personally have a nephew, and we didn't realize that he wasn't hearing. And so he doesn't hear well, he's not speaking, but, you know, you say that, well, his dad spoke late, he didn't spoke he was like 5 years old. So it's just, you know, it's passed down. And then we realized he wasn't hearing. And now that you're saying this, I'm imagining now that I have to go back and to see if it's just the hearing. It's like at that physical level.
Is one of the first things they test for when you have your suspicions, because you'll be like, you're hollering your name and they're not answering you, they're not responding, you was off in the corner. And so one of the first things they do normally is check the hearing, because sometimes that's all it is. And once they get the hearing, they start hearing better, the words will come.
Right.
However, sometimes the hearing is fine and they're still not responding. And that's when we've got to figure out, how do we enter their world and how do we help them?
Right. So sometimes it's not just to identify and stop there. Well, it was just at this physical level, but it's to continue to see that developmental, because that's another aspect that you mentioned. So I think the developmental indicators, once we have that awareness, we can,
and that's the key thing is to make sure we see where kids, we know they learn differently and you're going to have struggles. But if you start seeing your child falling a little bit more behind and not meeting these parameters every time, then we've got to look and say it might not be the A word, but we do have to do something for it. And so how do we work with it? Because if we just leave them alone, some kids might just start catching up, especially with COVID. If they were supposed to be in pre-K or kinder and didn't get that socializing, they've fallen behind. But maybe once they get back into school, it'll be a quick catch up for some. But some children won't. And then the gap will keep growing. And that's when we have the problem. The idea is if we give them help, we try and keep that gap as small as possible, if not eliminate it altogether. And that's the thing with autism. We can work with our kids. We can teach them. And so we try and keep that gap small. So we've had children who were like a level 2 and with work and support and everything else, if they're tested again in 5 years, could be tested as a level 1. It is a lifelong disorder. So if they're on the spectrum, they're on the spectrum. But what it is we're teaching them on how to live with life and handle their
as normal as possible.
Right. Exactly. And so, but similarly, you might have a child who at age 2 was diagnosed with autism and said, oh, you're high functioning, you're a level 1. But because they didn't get the support, they didn't get the help, and they're just sort of left, the gap grows bigger. And if they get tested again, all of a sudden they're going to be a level 2 or a level 1. So you can fluctuate that way. So that's why it's super important for us to keep working with our kids and giving them whatever support they might need.
Right. You mentioned the socialization aspect, and I'm thinking how much more difficult that is for you to catch up on some of those indicators. Like, what are some of the things we can look out for when it comes to behaviors? Because children are generally their own persons. They're unique, they're different, so you don't compare them to other children to the same extent.
Well,
so
you want to see, by age 2, kids will be playing side by side. You're not necessarily playing with each other, but they'll be playing side by side. But by age 3, then there's more interaction and everything. And if you start seeing your kid, and even with a room full of children, he's the one in the corner. This is something, and you're trying to bring him in and he never wants to. I mean, we all have those days where you want to be the one in the corner away from everybody because you're just tired of people. Right. I hope that's not just me. But if you're seeing this sort of behavior, if they're not playing appropriately with kids or don't know, or they might be the one that'll go up and just push because they might not have the words, so they don't know how to interact with children. That might be, something like that. So you want to see what their behaviors are and how they'll interact with others. And so if you start seeing that, and again, it could just be they're the only child or they were home for COVID and they need a little bit more of that thing, because neurotypical children or normal ones, they learn differently and they kind of go like this, but we kind of just learn behaviors. What we call it is the hidden curriculum. I always use this example. When we get on a bus and I walk in the bus and there's a couple people around, I try to find the seat that has nobody. Right? Why?
That's so true.
We just do that. Nobody taught us to do that. Nobody said that this is polite and this is what you have to do. We just do that. That's a hidden curriculum. That's just something we've learned by watching others and getting this behavior. Our autistic kid might get up on the bus, walk in and sit down in the first seat next to someone. And the whole rest of the bus is empty. And so somebody's going to watch him and what's wrong with this dude?
Yeah.
Why is he sitting next to me and you got 10 other seats free? That's going to be the question. And the thing is, the autistic kid is proud because they've worked with him to teach him to get on the bus and sit down. Nobody ever told him, you have to do this. And because they're literal minded, sometimes you have to work on this. I watched a therapy once with a teenager, and they're teaching them to cross the street. And you look both ways, and if there's no car coming, you cross the road. Okay, and you can say they've been working on it. So he says, all right, let's do this. And so you see the kid look, and then he goes to step out, and the professional pulls him back, and a truck passes by because they told him car. If you see a car, you don't cross.
Just literal.
Right? A lot of kids, if they see a dog for the first time and they say 4 legs, furry with a tail, that's a dog. And then they might see a cow and that might be a dog too, or a horse because they have the 4 legs and a tail for a toddler, right? 6-month-olds and one dog. They might be saying woof woof because it doesn't matter the size or whatever. They just think general. 4 legs, a tail, that must be a dog. Our kids, if I say, Chihuahua is a dog and it's got the 2 legs or whatever, and I show him next a German Shepherd, he won't recognize that as a dog necessarily because they haven't generalized. And so sometimes with socializing and everything, it's about that. It's trying to get them to generalize and not get these. And it sounds weird because I've never thought about it. I mean, you just know you find the MTC. You just know these things. But for some of our kids, they don't quite get that. I don't know why, but they don't.
I love that you mentioned that sometimes it's the literal miscommunication because this is another nephew. No, my whole family is not. I don't think all my nieces and nephews are autistic. Right. So I'm learning, but I'm looking at the examples that I'm seeing, and I remember telling him, "Please clean your shoes before you go to school." And I saw him get the stuff to clean it, and he cleaned bottom of the shoes. And I'm like, "Why you would clean the bottom of the shoes?" He said that's the dirtiest part. And so now that you mentioned that, they are literal.
That is exactly what it is. I mean, this is what you told me, and this is what happens a lot, especially with our high functioning kids. They don't get diagnosed normally until later because they are able to sort of struggle along. They're the kids that might be C, but they're working towards it. But they're smart, but they're struggling a little bit. And then as they get older, you start realizing, wait, that this is a kid that's sort of weird like that. And their teacher will say, watch and say, why are you behaving this way? For example, we read body language. So if my mom crosses her face and you know that look, everything. And so if a teacher does something and may be a bit sarcastic or give him a look, if they don't get that that's the teacher's angry look because it doesn't sound the same as their mom and their dad, he doesn't think it. So he might get up and do something or just go to the bathroom. The first time he goes to school and he just walks to the bathroom and the teacher would be like, where are you going? To the bathroom. And the teacher's like, oh, really? So you think you're the boss? And the kid isn't being rude. It's just at home, if he wants to go to the bathroom, he goes to the bathroom. So unless he's specifically told you have to ask or you can't go, this might be one of the first problems going into school at that time. Or if the teacher says something and the whole rest of the class gets the sarcasm, and so they'll shut up and behave because they know teacher's mad. That may be the kid who doesn't read that emotion, that affect, the body language, everything, and will still laugh because they think it's funny and not that somebody's mad.
Not getting that social cue. Miss Christy, I know you work with a lot of parents.
Yes.
So how would you rank the level of prevalency in Belize when it comes to autism? Because I know it's something that we don't really see or hear unless it knocks at your door. But is it something that happens a lot in Belize?
Yeah, around the world, you're looking at that some statistics have 1 in 52, 1 in 58. I think the latest one out of the CDC in the US is 1 in 52. In Europe, the average is like 1 in 60. But basically around the world, that seems to be between the 1 in 50 to 1 in 60. I don't see any reason for that to be any different in Belize because it will affect any socioeconomic group. It'll affect any culture. So there's no reason. And from the numbers and the parents I see and the calls I get, like I said, I've been at this, a year and something now. The amount of people who I have spoken to and have contacted Autism Belize in one way, shape, or form, I have no reason to think that Belize would be any different than like the 1 in 55, let's say.
Wow.
I kid no. Unfortunately, we don't have the statistics. It's hard for parents to get a diagnosis in this country, so that's hard. We don't know as a general population. Like you said, you don't know. You think this is the kid that is rude, and we think we have spank him,
right?
And we have teach him to behave because that's what we need to do. Oh, he's a picky eater. Yeah, sit there and he not move till he eat the food.
Yes, because
not even understanding there's a lot of oral issues with our kids, and they're not picky eaters. They have like problems with eating. And so because we don't know, we're not getting the diagnosis, and it's not easy or cheap to get a diagnosis here. And then
so what do I do?
What
like
do you
you said, the diagnosis, like I'm watching this show and I realize she's mentioning some things that I don't need to be worried about, but I want to check on. So what's the first thing I do? Who do I contact? How do I get help with?
That's the biggest problem. How do you know? I've spoken to several pediatricians in this country. I mean, some of them that work in the private sector, and they said, you know what? We didn't go to school for this. We don't, like the pediatrician said, honestly, I'm seeing some of these things. I think it might be, but I'm not the professional. I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to tell them to do. And a lot of our families are at that place where they might, or maybe the grandmother, the aunt, if the mom isn't catching it, somebody else outside is catching it. And they call me and they're like, what do you do? And I go, the $1 million question, because we have a couple people that provide this service privately, but you're looking at spending, $1,000 or more to get a diagnosis. I mean, they have payment plans and stuff, but still, that's out of the range of a lot of our families. And then Dr. Sosa, who is a neurologist at BMA, he specializes really in older people, but because he's giving back, he goes, I think it's once a month to KHMH, I think, but his wait list now to do basic assessments. But his wait list now is about 5 months.
5 months?
5 months.
Wow.
To see him. At least the last time I spoke to him, that was what it was. I don't know with all the COVID issues and stuff, if that hasn't been longer. Before COVID, Inspiration Center would have professionals come in every now and again, and they would just do these rapid assessments. But then, even then, Inspiration Center had a long wait list as you're waiting for these people to come.
Inspiration Center.
And so it hasn't been easy for these families to get a diagnosis. And that's stage 1. Because somebody will tell you, a specialist comes in, you finally get in through Inspiration Center and they tell you, yes, your son is autistic. All right, bye-bye. And then the parent comes home and they can go on Google, but then what? So there's been nobody there to help these parents and say whatever. And so even some of the behaviors, I've had parents say, well, my son is autistic. I go, yeah, but we can work on those behaviors.
And when you say we, you mean Autism Belize. So you provide.
As parents, we help each other out, right?
You help each other
Exactly. You'll have a parent last week that saying, oh, my kid's taking off their clothes, I don't know why. And so all the parents chimed in and said, try this, try that, try the other. So we help each other out.
So in response to that question of what do I do, I'm watching this show. Miss Christy has me a little bit worried. So that means we should be able to give them your number, and they'll get in contact with you, and they have that support group with the parents. Right? So if you're listening and you're watching, I hope that this has been a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit. When we come back, I want Miss Christy to tell us a little bit more of what you do, how to assist the children, those with autism spectrum disorder. And you can leave your questions in the comments so that we're able to help you answer them or any of your concerns. And so we'll be right back after a little break, and Miss Christy will share with us a little bit more about the services they provide now that we understand what autism is.
Are you taking heart medicines? Medications can give us a false sense of security. Even if a person takes heart medicines, eating a lot of saturated or trans fats, fast and junk foods, red and processed meats, sweets, and processed foods will still increase inflammation and make cardiovascular disease worse. That's a fact. But there's hope. A study of more than 31,000 adults found that you can substantially reduce cardiovascular recurrence beyond drug therapy alone by eating a diet rich in vegetables, fruits, and fish, and low in meats. A heart-healthy diet reduced their risk of dying from cardiovascular disease by 35%, a new heart attack by 14%, heart failure by 28%, and stroke by 19%. So eat your veggies. A healthy heart starts with a healthy meal.
With coronavirus and this pandemic, is there any hope when things appear so desperate? Can I make a difference? Absolutely, we can make the difference. How do we do this? With social support. Reach out. Show people you care. Show your friends you care. Show your neighbors you care. Waving, smiling, check on how your friends are doing. But if you're vulnerable, if you're in a risk group, whether it be because of one's age or other constraints of having other illnesses, stick to what is safe to do. Don't put yourself at risk. Help others, but help them in a way which will be meaningful and stick to the messaging.
All my life, I've been dealing with projects. I do a lot of research. Basically try to understand how different materials affect fires. It involves a lot of formulas and gathering data. I met this girl once in grad school, and we got to talk about all kinds of things and also about God. It was great. I could share with her what I believed in. And then I got busy with my own research and realized I may have treated her like a project. Like, I kind of expected her to change herself. But people are so much more than projects. There's some kind of human connection to it. I think we're supposed to share our lives with those around us, but sometimes just being with them, being their friend, that's the best way to find true connection. And that's what witnessing is to me, relationships and friendships.
Putting God first can be difficult. What can we learn from Esther that will help us put God first in our lives today? When Esther joined the selection process that would eventually make her queen of the Persian Empire, many doubts must have rushed through her mind. Her people were exiles, and their hopes were dim. It looked like God had abandoned them to Persian rule while still requiring obedience. But Esther was beautiful, both inside and out. Even a ruthless king could see that. So, Xerxes chose her to become his queen. Esther enjoyed her palace and privileges she could only have imagined in previous years. After a while, King Xerxes was deceived by an advisor when he issued a death decree against all Hebrews. When challenged to beg the king for mercy, Esther was afraid. It's difficult to put God first when we struggle with poverty and the lack of resources. Yet, wealth and power often also lead people away from Him. How do you put God first when you have more wealth and influence than those around you? Well, follow the example of Esther. She said, "Go, gather all the Jews, and fast for me for 3 days. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Esther was not immune to fear, but she was as courageous as she was beautiful. She bravely decided to put God first, investing all, even her life if necessary, to save others. Her words, "If I perish, are engraved in the story of God's people to encourage those who, through the ages, would also be called to do the same. And we know how the story ended. Esther put God first. Her example compels us to do the same. As the deacons collect the tithe and promise, we are challenged to put God first.
Welcome back to Defining Your Health. We're talking about autism awareness and advocacy today. And with me once more, I have Ms. Christy Castillo Almeida. She's the executive chair at Autism Belize. So we have her sharing with us in the first segment. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it. But we hashed out a little bit, what is autism? What does it look like? Some of the indicators. And now we want to look at the services in terms of the support that you provide at Autism Belize and how these parents, how are their lives different from those of regular parents? Is it even fair to say that their lives are different?
Oh, yes. It would be unfair to say they're not. One study showed that a parent with a child with special needs or autism, the cost of that child is about 6 times more expensive than a regular child, a typical child. So yes, the lives are different. It's harder because of their behaviors, because of the issues with, noise, light, whatever. Parents don't go out. They might not take their child out. They're worried about how people will look at them or look at the child or treat the child if they get bullied. So a lot of our parents find themselves isolated, especially when people don't understand, because people's first thought is, oh, why not just spank her? Or you should force him to eat or whatever. And so instead of getting in debates or dealing with the looks, they stay home. It's also hard for us too. Like if we have our friends and all of us had kids at the same age, we start going to a party and you start seeing the kids and what all they can do. And all of their skills and bragging is, oh, it's doing this, it's getting great. And our child is still here and we're still working on, learning ABCs. Right. It's hard for parents. So they tend to isolate. They feel like nobody understands what they're going through. And then you've got to deal with all the additional behaviors because you get the diagnosis, but then you might be dealing with, some, because there's a lot of comorbidities. So your child has a 60% chance at some point in their life to have anxiety or depression. They might battle with sometimes with aggression. There's the stimming behaviors. And so last month, my son broke 2 windows, just goes and bangs. And so there's that high expense cost, but then it's a lot of stress. A lot of our kids, because of what the brain doesn't produce enough serotonin, they don't sleep. So in October, my son slept through the night maybe 4 times in October.
In the entire month?
In the entire month of October. I mean, sometimes we get better, sometimes it gets worse, but there are times when, he'll go to sleep at 11 and he'll wake up at 1 and he'll party until 1 o'clock in the afternoon before he passes out again. And I mean, he's up, he's happy. It's not like just laying around. He's running around laughing like he's drunk or something. He's just all this energy. And so you have a lot of those issues. So parents are, they're tired, and you have parents that, you can't blink because they tend to elope. They'll try and escape and get out, and they don't understand about traffic or dangers, a lot of them. And so you always have to have your eye on them because you don't know. Some of them get fascinated by fire. So they'll go and turn on the stove. So I have parents that have to turn off the gas at night so their kid won't do that, or flood the bathrooms because they're obsessed with water. And so they go and turn on every pipe in the house. So you have to, because some people say, well, why? He's 14. Just leave him up and you sleep.
Yeah, he's old enough.
Yeah, he might flood my bathroom or leave the refrigerator open and everything will spoil. So there's a lot more concerns. You really have to be extremely vigilant. And again, this varies the level depending on the degree of autism again. But generally you have all of these other things you're dealing with.
So that's definitely, because you're mentioning all these things, and I'm thinking about, what about the parent that has to work? Is that even a thing? Can you even work? You have to be full-time.
I have one family and they're always working with a child. They're hands-on, and they've gone through a series of nannies with problems and stuff. And with COVID, their child was doing good. He's progressing and smart boy. But with COVID, they've had some regressions, and all of a sudden he started getting aggressive. And so, the nannies quit and whatever, and they need the 2 incomes in the home because there's 3 kids, but they were seriously considering one of them to leave their job to stay home because they just didn't know what they were going to do. And the packages, don't get me started on that. That's not going to work with our kids. I mean, even our high functioning ones online, they don't want to put on the camera. Some of these social things are bad. And so we have had a lot of regression, and it's just not working. And so parents are struggling. But you mentioned nannies, and I'm wondering, are these nannies even capable of providing that level of vigilance? That's where the Parapro comes in. My son is always, because he's severely autistic. He's a level 3. He's 14. He's nonverbal. You name the behaviors, we've had it. We've had depression, aggression, anxiety. We have OCD. We've had feeding issues to the point where when he was younger, I'd feed him, and there are days where every day there'd be vomit. And then, it got a little better. So it was once or twice a week. And he had extremely limited diet. He couldn't chew properly because of the apraxia in his mouth. We've had all kinds of things. So he's always had what I call a shadow. or a paraprofessional is the proper name for it.
Paraprofessional.
Paraprofessional, but in the Caribbean we would call them shadows, because think about it, they shadow.
Okay.
They have to go everywhere, right? So the only way schools would accept my son because of his degree is if he had a shadow. So he'd go in the classroom and he has a shadow that would work with him, a shadow that would run around with him, a shadow that understood when we were doing potty training what his look is when he needs to go to the potty. So she knew how to take him, because we couldn't expect the teacher to be, he needs that much attention. Mm-hmm. And so he's always had a shadow. So when these parents were calling me over COVID, and first they had the lockdown and there's no school, but then the parents had to go back to work and the kids were home, and what are they going to do? And they tried hiring, regular nannies, and some of them stepped up to the plate and figured it out. We've had nannies attending our trainings a lot to learn, but then some of them struggled. And that's what a paraprofessional comes in. A paraprofessional is more than a nanny, because a nanny, you think about, that's the person that'll change a diaper and feed the kid. A paraprofessional is to help them learn to potty train, or help them learn to eat properly, or you give them set tasks and behaviors and they will work on the child. So they can go in the classroom and they would be in school and they would be helping. So everybody else is learning this and they would sit down and work with it. Right. The teacher still has to give the work. They're not a teacher, but they will help the child work with it.
Because they have a more acute understanding of their needs.
So my son, because he's nonverbal, we always have a list of words we're working on. The paraprofessional will make sure, the school knows. So everybody's working on the same thing. Or she'll come back and say, oh, they're teaching him the sign for please and please. So now, every day now, we have to make sure he says please before, because we're doing that. So there's a great transition between home and workplace. I've known in the past some paraprofessionals who, they might not even work in the home or at school, but because parents wanted their child to take soccer or swimming or whatever, they'd hire a parapro to make sure that it worked, because they know in a big crowd that our child would be ignored or not integrated in properly, but a paraprofessional will make sure these things happen. And
so you provide training for moms, for interested persons who want to become a paraprofessional to assist, or to to help their own children.
It's certified training now. I recognize there was a need for it, and there were nannies again that really wanted to learn but needed more tools. So we developed a 20-hour course. It really became like 25 hours because it's really content heavy. And people could sign up and they take the course, and it usually, what we did was 4 Saturdays in a row, and they'd come in and it's basically all your Saturday. And we started about what's autism and the other learning disabilities, because a parapro can work with others with special needs and learning disabilities. So we discussed that, and then we started to talk about the different interventions and how you can work with them, and how you would teach a skill, and what do you do when a meltdown happens, and here are the things you look for, and how can you calm down a child. And so we did all of these stage by steps, the different evidence-based interventions. We went through what their role is, what a teacher role is, what a parent role. We gave sample contracts that they could sign for, if they get hired. And so the first course we did, we had 36 participants start out. We graduated 32 of them. Mm-hmm. Some of them, a huge chunk, were parents who just really want to know how to work with their kids better. Some of them are already teachers who want to learn more and go back to their classroom and be able to help their kids more. And then we had some, I think it was almost like 9 of them, who wanted to work as a nanny for it. Because, there were some nannies already who came to learn more because they know their child has special needs. But then we also had about 9 who wanted to just get in this field and get hired. And we graduated them in September, and I think we've hired 6 or 7 of them have been hired and are working now too.
Wow.
So, and that was our first cohort. We have over 20 people interested in doing a course in Belmopan, another 20 or so in PG, Orange Walk. So the goal is to go to all the districts and offer the course. COVID numbers has put it on hold, because we were supposed to do Belmopan in October. And because of the high rates, we put a pause on it. And I didn't want to go Zoom. I wanted to be there, because when we're talking about it, we'll show you how not to hold a child, how to do this. And so a lot of it was hands-on, and we had them making things, and like what you see here.
Right. So, I just before you get to showing me some of the things that these parapros do, you said it's a certified course, and we have a lot of teachers in the Adventist community. Is there any relationship to the Ministry of Education?
Yes, this is recognized by the Ministry of Education. It's a 20-hour course. This was done. They saw the whole modules, everything. This is all approved by the Ministry of Education. The goal is that we hope that once we start certifying larger numbers of parapros, that if schools need to hire teachers' aides or paraprofessionals, or if parents want to send their child to school with a paraprofessional, schools can start to say, you need to be certified first.
Wow.
You need to know what you're doing. We need to know that you know what you're doing, and so that it is there. So yes, that's where we want to go. We just started for it, but that's where it is. And it is a science-based course. It was done with the help of a professional who does this for a living and was trained in Europe and everything. So we paid her to help, and she trained our facilitators. Several of our facilitators are actually NARCY officers too, so they already had a special ed background for it too. So we made sure we tried to train some of our professionals here to facilitate the course.
Oh, that's lovely. I mean, and you have so many affiliate relationships with the different government institutions, so it's all working together to create.
We're really
change.
trying. We've been building a relationship with the Ministry of Human Development, MOECST. Lately, we've been in talks with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, and we've got some stuff coming up for 2022 with them. And it's been good. Even the Ministry of Transport had reached out because they wanted to sensitize their workers about all disabilities. So we worked with BAPTA and the National Council on Aging together. And we've done training for their people. And again, COVID put it on hold again. But we should start back again doing more trainings we want all the bus terminal workers, taxi drivers, everybody to do this course. And it's all being done through the Ministry of Transport. And so it's wonderful. The other day, Ministry of Agriculture contacted us and say, hey, we'd like your input on something. And so it's good. There's such need in this country, and resources are limited. Time is valuable. And so it's really good when we can work together to get things done.
Where do these trainings occur? Do you have a site location?
So our parent and teacher trainings are all done online. You can register for parents. You register through Autism Belize. Now for teachers, you have to go to the TLI. We're on the Teachers Learning Institute. So that you register there. For the paraprofessional, what we're doing is we're taking persons who are interested, since we're waiting to see how we can schedule it. And that can be done at autismbelize.org. Those were done in person. So the first one in Belize City was done at the Hub. Again, Ministry of Human Development offering and supporting us there. In Belmopan, we have a couple sites there, but again, we're trying to see if the numbers can drop, and because we have to be in person. And even though we maintain distance and mask and everything, that's a lot of time together, in a place. So we just want to make sure everybody's safe. So that's what we're waiting for there. But you can go register for the parapro because that's done in person. But our parent teacher trainings are done online, and our parent support group meetings, which are the last Saturday of every month at 6:00. That's been done Zoom, again, because of COVID, but it works because now we have parents that log in from Orange Walk and from PG and from Belmopan, and that they're there every month. So I kind of, even if the numbers drop, I don't know if I want to go back to in-person parent support because I feel like I'll ignore some of
you
our
have
parents.
a more diverse field. So every Saturday evening at 6:00.
The last Saturday of every month.
Sorry, this last Saturday of every month. That's what the parent support group.
Yeah. And that's for parents, caregivers, and it's sort of like it's think of it like one of those support. It's what happens there stays there. It's a non-judgmental area. So, you can celebrate your child's accomplishment, or you can cry and say, God, why me? Because we all have those moments in time that we struggle. And it's a place where you realize you're not alone.
And I love that you have so much effort towards support, because if the parent isn't able to handle all the frustrations or even the depression, then they're not able to help their child. I notice that you also have an opportunity, a platform where parents can share.
Yes.
Right?
We call it A Parent's Perspective. It's a weekly blog that's on our site. I started it because one of the first things I realized that people were shy about talking about their kids or their things. They're like, I'm going to come here, but I don't want my camera on. I don't want people to see me, or I don't want to put my name out there. Or, I'd ask them, would you come to this? And they don't want to because they haven't even told their family that their child is on the spectrum. And so I wanted to show people that it's fine. And so I started blogging personally about my stories. And I'd talk about, oh, Mateo said a new word today. Or, oh God, he's not sleeping and I'm dying and I don't know what to do. I've gone through this gambit, and it took a while, but now parents are writing in. So they send their stories, and there've been some that have talked about how the depression that they battle, but some that just are celebrating how far their child has come. So it's really good to when we get other parents coming in, and I feel great about it because it helps the person who isn't touched by autism learn a little bit more and see how our lives are different. But it also helps us parents who are out there and still haven't come to a meeting or anything to realize they're not alone. What they're going through isn't unique necessarily to them, and that it's okay to feel these ways sometimes, or that there are things you can do. And so it's sort of like our way to try and draw people into our little community there. But it's called A Parent's Perspective. And we post it usually Friday or Saturday, and there's a new one there. So if you go to the website, you can see the old ones, or if you subscribe, then you'd get a notification when it's posted too.
Right. I think it has some great material, but looking at some of the content, and for the first time I realized that it's really, it really affects you.
Yeah.
I read your entry where you spoke about having dreams and having ambitions. You have expectations.
My reflections.
In the world, we all have that. And then autism steps in, and you have to decide how to not make it the end of the world.
A lot of my blogs, I'm absolutely revealing. And I never thought I'd be that person who would be so open. But I felt families do, and the response has been good. I have parents that I read your blog and I cried because that's exactly how I feel, or you made me laugh today, or people that I've not met in person will say, congratulations, Mateo, because they just heard something. So it is very revealing, the blogs, and sometimes they're hard to write because I'm putting myself out there, I'm putting my son out there. But I know we have hundreds that read regularly, they're looking for it. And several messaged me last week and say, why there's no blog? What's going on? And I had to explain, I don't have a computer right now, so they've been put on hold. But I do know I have those that are regular followers that just want to learn, even though they might not know me personally or be touched by autism. They read because they just like learning and listening to the stories.
I'm so glad you're able to turn this experience into an opportunity for others to benefit. I want you to tell me a little bit now about some of the activities that you do, especially for those on the spectrum that are
nonverbal. Okay. Well, first, one of the biggest evidence-based interventions for autism is ABA. It's applied behavioral analysis. And it's sort of about breaking tasks down into smaller things. So, for example, if you have to teach someone to brush their teeth, how many steps do you think it would be?
Okay, 3. Pick up the toothbrush, you get the Colgate, you squeeze the Colgate. Okay, that's more than 3. Maybe 5.
5. So tell me, this is my toothbrush and things. You tell me. Okay.
Okay, so you pick up your toothbrush, you pick up the Colgate, you open the lid for the Colgate. No, you have to put down back the toothbrush. Okay, so we pick up the Colgate first. You open that. Okay, you pick up the toothbrush, and now
I have the cap in my hand and the toothpaste.
Right. It's
And that's what you have to think about. When we give our kids instructions, there are lots of different steps. And for a child with autism whose brain processes a little differently, it's like trying to force a word program on a Mac computer. They just kind of not work. And that's how their brains are just a little bit different. And so when we give an instruction, we're not thinking how many steps. Most people with toothbrushes start out with 5 steps, 7 steps. You can break that down into 20 plus steps that you have to teach a child just to get them to learn to brush their teeth.
Yeah, I got scared just now because I'm like,
so that's what it is. A lot of our things are that. And then for kids, they're visual learners. The majority of them need to see it because it's hard listening. So for example, a normal parent would be like, the kid walk in, boy, take off your shoes and put up your bag and then come here, Mecca, and go wash your hands and come and eat. You just gave 5 different instructions at once. A child on the spectrum is still trying to process, take off the shoes, much less everything else. And because they get confused, it's sort of like that spinning wheel on your computer because they kind of shut down. and they won't do anything at all. And so parents will be like, what do you do? And so a lot of times what we have to do is put a lot of our instructions in visual materials. So in a classroom, for example, if teachers would have up what's called a visual schedule there, you have the different ones, and you know, they're on Velcro, so you can take them off and on. This in a classroom helps the child understand what's happening next, because they need the schedule. They need to know what's happening. For us, we get up in a day, and I don't know about you guys, but I have to look at my to-do list or my calendar to see what meetings I have, because sometimes that affects my mood. Our kids get up and they might not know that today is Monday or Tuesday, or they don't know what is what. So if they have some sort of schedule, this helps. And so I've had teachers that'll say, oh, but you know, he's good at math, but then when it's time to go to English or to whatever, he gives a lot of trouble. Like maybe he doesn't know what's coming next, and that transition. So visual schedules help with our kids a lot.
So this can be a daily visual schedule. This is for the
Yeah,
classroom.
that's there's one at home that can have shower, brush teeth, bed, whatever, and that's there. And then sometimes you can have sort of the negotiation. Oh, you want a later bedtime? Okay, first you'll do this, and I don't think I brought a first and then. You can have a schedule that says like first this, then that. So first you eat your food, then you can have the iPad. And you can have these regular pictures, or people have like what's called object boards.
Object boards.
Especially for our kids who are nonverbal, they'll put the actual box of Oreos, the actual bag from the Cheetos, and all of that can be on a wall or on a board. And so the kid who can't yet say Oreo can go and point to Oreo, because again, they think so literally, they might actually do better with the packs. Because I've had some parents say, oh, I can't see this or do that. And so we have to work a lot with visuals. And that's why we started the gift of communication, to work with our children, and to help some of the kids at Stella Maris. Because when I went to visit, I found out over 40 of their kids struggle with language communication. They're either nonverbal or have limited verbal skills. So very few words, or some might have a very few sign language, but not fluent. So if you're not fluent in sign or fluent in words, I put all their names in a thing. And what we've been doing is giving tablets out with what we call an AAC device. And this is what it looks like here. So that's actually the most expensive part of it. But what it is that's a very basic setup. It gets more complicated as it gets older. I don't know if you can do it. So like a child can go, I want, and then they'll say to eat, and then they can choose what they want. And these can be smaller or bigger, and the iPad speaks for them. So my son will come up to me the other night and he goes, please, because he's doing the sign. And I go, Mateo, please, what? What do you want? And he got his iPad and he says, I feel sick. Now he's got allergies, so he's been kind of stuffy this week. So I go, okay, so what do you want? He goes, I want bed. And then he's grinning. So I know he's just playing a game. I go, oh no, my son is sick. Let me get up. And I got up and because what he wanted was an air mattress in my bedroom, because he has to sleep in his. So he's trying to be funny about this, right? So I had to go and put the air mattress in my room, and I put it, and I go, okay, you're sick now. And then he's peeking and he's laughing, right? So I turn and I go back outside, and then right away he jumps in my bed. He doesn't feel sick. He's fine. He just wants to do that. But it's the same thing. He'll come and he'll ask for like, I want to eat whatever. And I'll say no. And then he'll go, I feel frustrated. Now he can't say this verbally, but he can express it here. And that's what we want. We want children to be able to speak, because they can learn. They understand everything. We just work with them.
I think I need to be a part of this Power Pro course, because I feel like we just really touched the iceberg, and it's time to wrap up, and we barely got into everything. We'll definitely need a part 2. But I hope our viewers were blessed this morning, that they learned something new, that it piqued your interest, so that even if you're not sure whether you have an autistic child, but you're a community person, you're a teacher, and you want to be able to help others, you can get on board with this initiative that Autism Belize has launched. You can be a part of the support group, right? Is there any final words you would like to share?
Acceptance is a big thing for us, right? Knowing that our community won't just give us looks or whatever. We understand that you don't understand. Many times we don't understand our kids or their behaviors either. But if you take the time to learn a little bit and just be accepting. So, you might see a kid throwing down on the grocery store or whatever. You can walk up to the parent and say, can I help? rather than give a look and judge, because you never know what's actually going through that kid's body or in his head at that point. He could be in tremendous pain and you won't know it. So take the time before you judge, accept and offer to help, because the only way we can learn and grow as a community is if we start understanding that every one of us is different. Every one of us has problems. And if we start understanding each other's problems and just kind of saying, well, how can I help? Or that's okay. That helps us as parents, because we already feel as isolated as this. And let me tell you, nobody judges anybody as harshly as we judge ourselves as parents, because we never know exactly what to do to help our child. So you don't need to do that. You just need to be open, ask a question, and just offer friendship.
Beautiful. Thank you, Miss Christy. We will definitely have to get you back here at our studios at ATN. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Defining Your Health. And we want to remind you again to share the link with your families and friends so they too can be updated and have an idea of autism awareness, and we can advocate on behalf of this as well.